out on the YouTube channel. Hey, everybody. I hope everyone's hanging in. Fantasy football, if anything, like life, Josh, it will just test your ability to persevere. It'll test your ability to get up every day and care
Yeah.
about something, care about anything. We've got a lot to care about here. Let's go ahead and go live. Who is the waiver wire running back savior of week 3? That more this week on the couch. So excited to have Josh Norris here. Josh, who is coming to save us at running back after the carnage of week 2?
Joshua Kelley. Joshua Kelley is.
Oh.
I know he's probably rostered in many leagues out there
Sure.
because your listeners are super sharp. But if we're looking at Yahoo Sig, he's available in 61% of Yahoo leagues out there, which is insane. And to me, he was a priority after week 1, and even more so in week 2, with it looking like Justin Herbert through injury and should have been through play is going to be the starter here in week 3. And the reason is, I mean, this isn't a diminishing role with Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is still obviously a priority on that offense. But what Joshua Kelley is he's also a priority. I mean, he has stepped right into that Melvin Gordon role. And in the areas where we care about most, he's still being featured somewhat in the passing game. But inside the 5-yard line, he's up to 6 carries to 1 inside the 10, I should say, compared to Austin Eckler. They have trusted him immediately. I think the ceiling absolutely is raised with Justin Herbert, and I'm excited to see what Joshua Kelley does for the remainder of the season.
It's a good one, and it can be a trade too. I mean, you can try to buy somewhat low. I actually believe Anthony Lynn when he says he's going to go back to Taylor.
Me too.
But I don't think it'll be for long. I think there's just faulty reasoning there, and unfortunately, it's like raising a kid. We all had experience in our lives. People can tell you things, but until you really see it, experience it for yourself. And I'm afraid Anthony Lynn needs to see that. But I was pleasantly shocked at Justin Herbert, at his poise, at his decision making, and it allowed his gifts, the things that made the number 6 pick come to the surface. Because I wasn't a big fan of the pick. But so far, so good. And I was joking with Cecil, Josh, that maybe this is how every rookie should get their first start, as you find out like 10 minutes before the game.
I mean, there was a great clip. My friends over at NBC, Paul Burmeister and Chris Sims, they were talking about this, and obviously both have experience playing quarterback at a much higher level than you or I do.
Right.
But Sig, I also think that there is something that we can relate into certain aspects and experiences that we've had, and transition them into possibly what happens at this high of a level for a professional athlete. Not saying it's the same, but, hopping on live television and not knowing exactly what's going to happen and what you're going to say, but being comfortable in that moment because you've done it in your past and because you do have a understanding of what the offense is going to be, or what the topics are, or what the just breadth of the NFL is and what you're discussing. It helps. Yet not being able to dwell on it, being able to focus on it for the entire week, and being put on a pedestal, in the media and around the team and the locker room, and not letting that fester. I think there absolutely is something where you learn 5 to 10 seconds ahead of time. And I'm with you. I mean, I had major questions about Justin Herbert. I don't want to go too far and say all those questions have been answered, because there were certainly moments that he did show up as a rookie, but I think that we can forget about those when it comes to rookie play. Focus on the moments that he did create, and that throw down the seam that I think he had over a linebacker, Tyrann Mathieu, the throw he had in the back corner of the end zone to Jalen Guyton, the movement that he showed. If that continues, then this weird perspective and situation that the Chargers found themselves in last April. I don't know if you saw this, Sig, back then, but Tom Telesco said that they were happy with either Tua or Justin Herbert. Like, they were going to take either one of those picks at number 6. We rarely hear that about 2 quarterback prospects in the middle of the top 10, right?
Right.
But if Justin Herbert does turn out to be good, and his first game was a great indication that he will, then that's a great selection.
Yeah, and I wonder if Miami felt the same way, because they didn't trade up from 5 to 3 to make sure they got their guy, unless they had really great intel, because they had the ammo to do it. The rest of the waiver wire carnage, just real quick: Giants, San Francisco, Carolina. Anybody interest you, or anybody you want to tell people specifically to stay away from as we're sifting through the rubble?
Yeah, I'll also point you to John Daigle's waiver column. I'm sure you guys have one.
Yeah, but by the way,
Too,
Josh Norris, Roto World, you know him, you love him. John Daigle, a couch. I mean, it's just because we were getting right down to business. But yeah, folks, you
of
know what's
course.
going on. Yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous of what Jerick McKinnon might do in 1 week and how much of a role they're going to give him. I think Kyle Shanahan loves Jerick McKinnon. I think that's pretty obvious because of how much positive buzz he created in training camp and the role that they've been giving him already. But I do wonder if he's going to see 20 touches. I highly doubt that. I would say much closer to 12. And, Jeff Wilson comes back in. And even last year, Sig, with Tevin Coleman and with Matt Breida, when Jeff Wilson was active and he was part of the game plan, he was getting the goal line touches. And we care about, the scoring positions to the highest degree. I'm fascinated by this Rams backfield. I mean, just have no idea what to think of because you and I and Matt Waldman and others think Malcolm Brown is absolutely a talent that can lead his backfield in touches. He did that in week 1. And then I understand he had a hand or a finger injury. And then Cam Akers went out. So then Darrell Henderson, who I wanted to forget about after his rookie year, is now back. So I love early in the season, I love to see not surprises, but what has changed from 2019 to 2020. And I think the Rams have done a great job of self-scouting and self-evaluating. And what Sean McVay is doing in these first halves of creating opportunities and creating space for his playmakers is fantastic. I'm just terrified of what to predict and what to tell everyone out there, your listeners, your viewers, of how they should handle that Rams backfield moving forward.
Yeah, I think if there's a pickup, it's Henderson because he's got the best talent to separate himself from the three. I think McVay's committed to using all three, though.
Yeah.
And it can be done well. McVay made the game. Now, granted, some of this, one of the most difficult things, Josh, for the first couple of weeks is how much of it is opponent-based, how much of it is schedule-based, and how much of it is a new reality. But he's made the game look very easy for Jared Goff. He's helped out Jared Goff a lot. The exact opposite of, say, what Bill O'Brien has done for Deshaun Watson a few weeks into the year. Are you even stopping to pick up off the shelf a Giants back or Mike Davis, or are you just walking right down the aisle?
Mike Davis more than the Giants back because I think Saquon Barkley's talent matched well with what this Giants offense was, in terms of he might get stuff for 12 yards on 10 carries, but he's one of those rare backs that has that ability to reel off a 50-yarder, 60-yarder, 70-yarder or more. And I'm telling you, Deion Lewis isn't going to do that.
No.
Wayne Gallman's not going to do that. So, nothing has really changed from that situation other than a rare talent exiting it that can reel off those explosive plays. And what Mike Davis showed me last week was, 8 catches on 8 targets. They're still going to get him used in that backfield. Reggie Bonifant will get involved. They're not going to go back to, 90% of the work with one back, I don't think. But what Joe Brady has done early on is exciting. He's turned a pigeonholed player, one who had the stigma of just a vertical playmaker in Robbie Anderson, into a player who now has a legitimate floor, right? He has a legitimate floor each and every week. They're kind of exchanging their DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel usage, and a lot of short and intermediate work. And with that comes running back catches as well. Look, that team doesn't have a super high ceiling, I don't think, because Teddy's the quarterback, even though I think Teddy's accomplishing what they want him to do. But yeah, I would much rather prioritize Mike Davis than any of those Giants backs.
Davis is a solid all-around player.
I agree.
I wonder, Chris Allen brought up a conversation that he and I had before the summer about whether Curtis Samuel could figure into the backfield or maybe could be the McCaffrey injury hedge. So that's going to be interesting to see. I think that Joe Brady, as you mentioned his name, he's going to be open to these things. So with a whole week to game plan without Christian McCaffrey, because like you said about Barkley, tactically, what McCaffrey does, the Chargers really might just smother the Panthers this week.
Yes.
And on those backfields myself, people know this, people listening to the show know this, but I just get caught by the fast, sudden, quick backs. I still think McKinnon, even if he's getting 12 or 15 touches a game, I wonder, because he's already had a very high fantasy points per touch. Is that a new metric now or something like that? The point is he's not getting many touches, and he's making plays to help your fantasy team if he just gets a few more touches. But this is why I'm explaining to everybody why they should not drop Naeem Hines after this week, Josh. So the universe is it's having some fun with us. The football gods are having some fun with us, because I was all over Naeem Hines all offseason. I did not really start him on many of my teams week one. I drafted him on most of my teams. My best ball teams are happy for it. And then everything happened in week one and then in week two. But going back, because we talked a little before we came on, this first 2 weeks, I mean, we've done this for a while, but this has been very, very disorienting.
It has. I mean, this isn't week 9, Sig. You know, like it's week 3. We have what we thought in the preseason on the work that we did for 3 months ahead of time. No new information basically changed any of that work. We just repeated ourselves for 3 months. Then we go in and are shocked by certain performances and usage and injuries in week 1. So then we've, adjusted our facts, we believe, our stances. And then week 1 to week 2 every year is drastically different. And it was again this week. I don't want to keep yo-yoing back and forth, or like the pendulum swinging back and forth between these. What I think we can hang our hat on, Sig, is recognizing offenses and teams, and mainly offenses, that we think are well organized and well run.
Yes.
That put players in positions to succeed, and not just go out there and chase garbage time. I'm like sick of chasing garbage time, to be honest with you, Sig.
Yeah.
Because garbage time just means you sucked for 3 quarters. And then you hoping that offense just turns it on for the final 12 minutes. And like, that's not how I want to go about, projecting my fantasy lineup at all. So look, I don't think the Panthers are a good team, but I think we know what Joe Brady is as a good play caller and how he's putting his players in a position to succeed. And I think that works. I don't think the Jaguars are going to go 8-8 this year, maybe not even 6-10, but I think we know what Jay Gruden is doing. I think we can trust Jay Gruden. I'm trying to give you teams that I don't think are going to win a lot of games, right? But still teams that we should rely on the usage so far and how that is projectable week to week. Meanwhile, the Jets out there, the Dolphins, I really don't want a part of them. I could go on and list a few more teams, but right now I'm buying into teams and offenses more so than individual spiked week performances.
That's why on the running back segment, Cecil and I just recorded the Waiver Wire show. I mentioned at the end Gus Edwards and Darwin Thompson because of the offenses, because we know they can play, and then we'll see. And those kinds of players are more likely to change your fantasy season than someone who's going to get an opportunity, but maybe not in a great situation or a great offense. And some of the verdict's still out where you're still watching the Bengals and Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor to see what they can put together as they can't overcome the offensive line and so on. Sean McVay's back in our good graces, as you mentioned at the top of the show. And I guess when you mentioned Robbie Anderson, like, when will we learn the Gase effect? Why were we letting Robbie Anderson fall? Where do we want Sam Darnold to revive his career?
I don't know, man. I mean, he's still super young, isn't he? Like,
yeah,
it has to go in like the Ryan Tannehill arc at some point. Yeah,
right.
Yet
the Jets fans are saying Patriots. Jets fans are like, he's going to be the quarterback for the Patriots. He's going to be great. I just know that's how it's going to go.
I don't know. To be honest, Sig, Darnold had these same negative qualities back at USC. Remember? Like,
sure.
That final season, he did have them. He had these blinders on that made him forget. And that's, I think, just being expounded on because it's such an awful team and such an awful organization at the moment. That's one. And what I've also realized, not to get too honest here with you, Sig, but
please.
That's
what we're here for.
I'm caring less and less about being right in draft evaluations and more so buying into just career arcs and development and how players change year to year and progression. Look, I think draft evaluations can really help. I like Darnell Mooney, for example. Darnell Mooney is a really fun player out of Tulane who I'm so glad he's getting an opportunity right now. And the reason he's getting an opportunity instead of Anthony Miller is because, and one reason is because he plays on the outside. Miller plays on the inside. And I can keep going on and on and on down the list of these evaluations. But like what I've loved seeing is Gardner Minshew come out, and at some point we need to forget about what we thought about him at Washington State or coming into the NFL, and just seeing that we have a true playmaker on our hands who's fun to watch each and every week. And then, I still think one of the best stories of the NFL is Ryan Tannehill, who had his moments, and now he's just so comfortable in this offense that he's doing exactly what he did last year, and even without AJ Brown last week. And just this combination with him and the offensive line and the running game and Arthur Smith, that's a team that I'm invested in now for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. They get Minnesota this week. And we all get to watch Jacksonville on Thursday night, so that's fun. So many things from what you said to jump on. This is why I've been bugging Josh to be on the show for a little while, because I just love talking to Josh. And I know from previous conversations we've had both on and off the air that we're going to get right down to the nitty-gritty here on some of the specific things you mentioned. The word alignment comes to mind already more than once. You want alignment between abilities, skills, talents, and how players are deployed. And you can really see when the quarterback and the play caller are on the same page, and the quarterback understands the concept of the play and understands why that's the right call against that defense at that moment. And Minshew looks like a 10-year veteran.
Yep, he does.
Taking Jay Gruden's scheme to the field, he looks like he's a future quarterback coach or offensive coordinator with how easy it was for him to just activate all of this. And it makes me wonder, is Anthony Gordon not even on a practice squad right now? Because I just have a little pet theory about reps, just reps, in-game reps that these Mike Leach quarterbacks get, and how creates more brain pathways and more experience, and it gives you that foundation to build from. I also want to take Mike Leach's insurgent warfare, guerrilla warfare class. Anyway, and then Tannehill and Arthur Smith. I think it's the same thing. And what I really like about Arthur Smith is he seems to have guts as a play caller. He trusts Tannehill. He trusts his players. He makes a lot of play calls that if they went poorly, he would be having the finger pointed at him, but his guys execute and execute and execute. So this is fun, alignment. And that's why Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are pushing things to a new level. Go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I always think back to this, Sig.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever listened back to these things. I did, I think it was last year. You and I, when Derrick Henry was coming to the NFL, just nailed his role. I mean, as early on as the ultimate fourth quarter closer,
right.
We knew like at the very least that's what he was. Now, they use him as a closer starting in the first quarter when they go up by 2 touchdowns, and then it just moves on from there. But I agree with you. Like their running game is quite standard with someone like Derrick Henry. I don't want to, be negative on him because he's awesome. I mean, he's an alien. But then some of their passing plays with also some of the receivers that they're using, like Jonnu Smith, and the immediate wide open, pass that he caught in the backside of the formation last week was fantastic. But then you're getting like Anthony Ferkser involved,
right,
and you're getting Adam Humphries, who's a free agent bust, involved last year, and now Corey Davis. Like he's relying on these players that he really shouldn't rely on. And I think that speaks to Arthur Smith as a play caller. Now, the other side of that coin, Sig, is the alignment of like the Minnesota Vikings is completely derailed. Completely derailed.
Right.
This is one of the worst teams in the NFL. And no one's talking about it because I don't think anyone wants to watch this team right now. And I don't think that they have a forward-thinking enough mindset to change it for the rest of the season. I think it's going to be, again, they're going to finish like a bad team because you have Mike Zimmer, who every time he's talked about analytics and talked about, changing his history, it's just not going to happen. And now Gary Kubiak is back as the offensive play caller. And I just think that their planning heading into this year did not really align, because just trading away Stephon Diggs, who obviously did not want to be there, but he led the NFL last year in 20-plus yard touchdowns, okay? And Kirk Cousins, during his time in Minnesota, has never been worse than the 7th best deep ball passer in the NFL. Who on their roster, they had to sit back and look at this, who on their roster was going to play that role and play that element on that team? It's not going to be BC Johnson. They're not going to ask Adam Thielen to do what he's never done. That's not Justin Jefferson's game. And so completely overlooking that part of the team, it's already showing, along with Gary Kubiak, who we know Kevin Stefanski was like number 5 or number 3 in play action rate last season. I went back and looked at Gary Kubiak during his, time with Houston and time in Denver. He was never better than like league average. And a lot of times he was in the 20s on play action rate. So like changing all of that, like those are two major pieces of this offense that made it work last year and made it be one of the better offenses in the NFL. And those are gone. And I just don't think that that's something that this year you can correct during the season.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to watch. Our teams, I wonder, Josh, in this COVID year, if teams mentally check out earlier than they used to. The teams where they know it's not going to work, when the blueprint's just not going to work. Because as you said, that blueprint had some critical points of failure. It had critical points of failure that were endangered by offseason moves. And it doesn't seem like there was any anticipation or any preparation for what are we going to do to make up for this. I mean, throw the ball to Dalvin Cook like they throw the ball to McCaffrey in Carolina or something. Irv Smith. I mean, we were hoping, hey, Irv Smith lining up outside, something, and you can just tell because Kirk Cousins is usually a very efficient quarterback, and he just looks miserable out there. The whole team looks miserable. And you're right in other teams, and I wonder even watching the Saints last night and how defenses are going to start to really compress the field on them because Drew Brees can't push the ball. Drew Brees just physically is not there anymore. They don't have a Jonathan Taylor like Indy has to balance out the deficiencies in Phillip Rivers' game at this point, because that's the whole thing, right? We were talking about Arthur Smith and we were talking about Tennessee. It's almost like a magician, right? I mean, the best offenses can get a defense lulled into thinking they know what to do and then make them look really foolish because it's like the dog with the tennis ball, like, oh, where did it go? And the next thing you know, Johnny Smith's on the backside, bolting down the field for 60 yards. And you can see the offenses that just they aren't even trying to do that. They're not even attempting to get into the chess mindset with inducing the defense to do things and then using that against them, because you can always do that no matter who your personnel is. And they're doing such an excellent job with that. Indianapolis can do that.
Yep.
Minnesota was supposed to be able to do that. I mean, you could see what Cleveland could do with that against a poor defense, mind you. But this whole discussion you talked about, because I meant to ask you, I had on the list of things I wanted to ask you, is just how it's been going from being a draft analyst. And I remember as you started to dip your toes into the fantasy football waters, and now you do them both and you do them very thoughtfully. And we have that same kind of arc and cycle to our year, because honestly, draft was my first love before fantasy football when it came to having a vision of I want to just talk and write about football and somehow have that be my job. Because the draft, the really interesting thing that what you sketched out where you said, hey, the draft evaluations are fun, but I'm not as interested in that as player development, is it's kind of like the genetics versus environment argument, right? The draft profile is the genetics, what we have to work with. But the environment, and again, alignment, right? The way the child's raised, the environment they're raised in, and even in genetics, environment causes different genes to express themselves differently, right? So it may not be an either or thing. But you're right that even if there's a player that we saw as somewhat limited, if we see them in a situation where they want to thrive, that's probably a much more important thing to understand and catch the indicators of than a player that we were really excited, like Anthony Miller, right? I mean, really excited about Anthony Miller as a raw talent. But then in this situation with this personnel and this organization, it's probably not going to happen for him. And, we file that away. So I think that's something that we can all do a better job at is, even someone like Dalton Schultz, which gets back to some brass tacks, right? Because, I mean, Dalton Schultz is just a guy, as far as a receiver. But his opportunity, it made me sad for the Blake Jarwin teams I had, man. What was Blake Jarwin going to do with this opportunity? We do have an interesting choice here. So maybe you're Zach Ertz isn't doing it for you, or you drafted Rob Gronkowski to be your starter, or otherwise, it's always good to be preemptive and keep someone else from getting the tight end that's going to be the breakout tight end of the year. We've got 3 potential this week: Mo Alley-Cox, Dalton Schultz, and let's not forget about Jordan Akins, just because he's looking good and maybe he's going to be the healthiest pass catcher on that team, like by week 5 or something. Do you have a favorite out of these 3?
Logan Thomas. Like I wish everyone out there had just gone back and
Yes.
gotten Logan Thomas
There
in
you
week
go.
1.
Yeah.
Because those same concerns with both those names that you mentioned were there after week 1 as well. Look, I mean, tight ends, it's just about not even targets. It's like targets in the red zone and inside the 10-yard line, or once you get to a certain point, that's where it is. I was surprised at how much Dalton Schultz was featured. I mean, so he would be number 1 on that list because this team, and we saw it especially when they were working from behind, they can hit all levels of the field. Maybe not vertically right now without the offensive lineman, but that should change hopefully when some of those offensive linemen come back. Poor one out for Michael Gallup so far. But yeah, Dalton Schultz was heavily involved, and I would expect that to continue moving forward until he proves he can't do that. To go back to your question about draft versus fantasy and football and all that kind of stuff, I think in like your first 3 to 5 years doing NFL draft stuff, and maybe it's just closer to 3 years, and I see this often now with even people younger than me. I'm not young anymore, Sig. That the confidence in your ability from the start is sky high, right? And that there's just no possibility in your own brain that you think you can be wrong in an evaluation. Then doing this for 3 years, doing this for 5 years, doing this for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, you realize how ridiculous that is, that you are going to be wrong often. And guess what? So is the NFL. Now, the difference between the NFL and you is that you post evaluations, rankings, what have you, thoughts on 200 to 300 prospects, right? Mm-hmm. NFL teams only show their evaluations on 7 to 10 players each and every year. So there's a lot of opportunity to be wrong in draft evaluation. I also think I've learned that I'm very bad at being like, hey, look at this, what I did 4 years ago, and look at it's turned out to be good or it's turned out to be bad. Right. I just hate that feeling that it gives me. So I also think that draft evaluations give you a bias, Sig. Mm-hmm. And that at some points, I'm sure, and we don't have to name names here, but I'm sure at some point in your past, you have rooted against a player because you had a negative evaluation on them. They've turned out to be pretty dang good. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to hold this stuff against them. Now, I think there can still be elements of truth to it, and they're just in a great situation, so on and so forth. But what I've realized I've love is, one, once they get to the NFL and even preseason games, like I would much rather have 100 snaps in the NFL versus 5 college football games to evaluate. And I just like to see the development and the usage and the progression like I talked about. And there are much more known qualities once you reach the league than what we're projecting on the college field. And I think that that's part of it. And then the other part is, in fantasy football, I think, and in every job, people try to be good at everything. But I think I'm in a great situation now with the people at Roto World where I can find my niche in there. Mm-hmm. And, we can let Hayden do his stuff. I can let Daigle do his stuff. I can have Pat, have his own delivery. Mm-hmm. And then I can just say what I want to say. And between the 4 of us and more, we can cover every aspect of a team or of a performance or of a preview and those types of things. So I would say work within your own self and know your own voice, and then allow the other people to fill in the gaps that you aren't qualified to do.
Yeah, I think that for everybody out there, where there's interest, where there's passion, the best work will come. And it's not always that simple. I mean, it's kind of showing the privilege I come from just to say that, because it's sometimes you have a lot of passion and gifts to give the world, but your circumstances just make it difficult to find a situation to do that. But what you said, I think, is excellent. And I want to highlight that dichotomy, because for draft, and absolutely, I'm not going to name names, but absolutely there are players that I think so draft analysis isn't fantasy football analysis. And the difference in how I hope I've evolved in time is that when we do draft analysis, and I don't get to do as deep of draft analysis as I did, say, 2007, 2008, 2009, when I was on the road trips, running the site, doing all kinds of stuff, is that as a draft analyst, we really want to illuminate for people the nature of the player. Just what's the nature of this player? I love it because I think, push the conversation forward. I've cited you, at least a couple times a year in that phrase, where he wins. And I think that what's funny is one of the biggest fallacies out there is that the NFL is a bunch of dopes and the draft a crapshoot and they don't even know what they're doing. And analytics existed in the NFL before we started doing it and thought that we discovered the wheel or something like that. And where he wins is good. The thing is, it's good organizations. Good organizations have been doing this stuff all along. Bad organizations don't. And there are bad organizations that are as bad as the worst place you've worked in your life. Still to this day, I think we know who we're talking about here. And where he wins, because there are organizations that say, like, don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what he can do. And that's why it's so difficult to be right if we're talking about outcome of a player's career when we're rating draft evaluations. But if you say, if he's asked to do this, this, and this, he'll be a success. If he's asked to do this, this, and this, then he's going to be a failure. Then you've revealed the nature of the player, and you've given folks a kind of roadmap to understand their career as it unfolds. And then also, character and athletic ability and things like that factor in too. Whereas for fantasy football, the one thing that makes our fantasy football advice not worth much is if we don't take a stand. If we just say, well, I don't know. Is he going to be, Dalvin Cook could be good this year because he's so good and the offense is aligned with his goal. Dalvin Cook could be bad this year because the Vikings offense doesn't have Stephon Diggs. I don't know. Good luck. We have to take a stand, and taking a stand in the draft analysis maybe gets in the way of the highest value of that. But we're only going 45 minutes today, folks. And it's 45 good minutes. And I feel like if we went longer than 45 minutes, who knows where we would end up. We'd probably be saying things that we would go back and say, did I really say that to an audience of people that's like on the record now about myself or about something else? But just real quick before we turn the page, because I still want to go off the rails. That's the part I always want to fast forward to anytime I have anyone on the show. But especially with you, any players that you're hot and heavy, like trying to trade for, you're smitten with. I know that we're disoriented, but as you're going through your rosters, you're going to make an effort to bring them onto your roster this week.
I heavily invested in a lot of rookies that I believed in heading into the season, and a lot of them haven't hit so far. I mean, your Clyde Edwards-Helaire was an easy one, right? But even when their draft values were discounted, I was leaving almost every single draft with, and I mean it, every single draft with Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, and Antonio Gibson. And I think their best football is still ahead of them. I don't know what's going on in Philadelphia right now. I think so much of it, that week one, it was one of the biggest talent differences, quality differences between that Washington defensive line and the Eagles offensive line. And I think when we can peg that every 3 to 4 games per week, when that shows up, then we should be very wary of that. I don't think in every game we should just say, oh, well, the offensive line is better, so the offense is going to produce more, and then vice versa. But I do think that there are 2 or 3 or 4 each week that have that as a determining factor. With Antonio Gibson, we saw in week 1 there was some positive game script, and then week 2 there was negative game script. And what he's done on limited touches so far makes a lot of sense. Now, I think, the Darius Guy situation, the Adrian Peterson's leaving, I think that propelled everyone to believe that, he's just going to be a feature back immediately. Whereas Sig, I think the closer truth was that his rookie season might be very similar to David Johnson, but by week 10, week 11, Antonio Gibson could be putting up 15, 20-point weeks for you and being the feature back in that offense at that point. And that's how you can still have that like league winner moniker, because in those final few weeks, and then we get the fantasy playoffs, it really does matter. Henry Ruggs, last night, I think that, his usage isn't going to show up in the box score because he drew some important downfield penalties. And I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't get him more involved in that short to intermediate and manufactured touch game like they did against Carolina. His usage in Carolina was fantastic. But I think it was because the Raiders team was just running all over the Saints, which was a little bit shocking. But finally, with Jalen Reagor and Philly, the way that they used him this past week was a lot more crossing routes, a lot more short to intermediate. His time is going to come. And I may even say that about Deshaun Jackson, who I believe is top 5 in the NFL in air yards already.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't want to put that Eagles offense 6 feet under already,
Yeah.
And if they are going to really be explosive, it's going to be with Miles Sanders, who played 80% of snaps last week. It's going to be with Dallas Goedert, who had a great week 1. And it's going to be with Jalen Reagor and Deshaun Jackson having sustained value in that offense as well.
I like that. And I like the Gibson take too. And I mentioned Gibson and David Johnson together almost like I'm required by law. But you're seeing him getting less raw as a runner on an NFL field. And the Philly offense, I hope so. I feel like Carson Wentz has been through so much already. And now he's carrying the whole franchise on his shoulders and caving under it because there's too many problems. But you're right that someone like Jalen Reagor, and if Ruggs gets healthy, I think that it went under the radar that Ruggs was the true centerpiece of the Raiders offense in week 1.
Yep.
And they were doing everything they could to get the ball in his hands as many ways as they could. Didn't see that last night because I don't think he's healthy. So yeah, rookies, delayed rookie impact. Okay, this is kind of a stock question, Josh, but it's just something I want to ask you to see where doors open. Because you're obviously a talented person who has a lot to offer the world, and you're here. There are people that I say that I wonder sometimes what I'm doing with my life, and then there are people like Matt Waldman or Bob Harris or other people in our circles that make me say, well, if this person's here, then it must be an okay place to be. You're certainly on that list.
Good point.
But if you weren't doing this, immersed in football, where would you be? What would you be doing? What do you think you would be doing to make your bargain with the universe and have a purpose?
God, I don't know how honest we want to get here, Sig.
Porn star. I'm just kidding.
No. I strongly considered leaving this summer. I strongly considered it, to be perfectly honest with you. It was honestly the plan until May or June. And then obviously the world was turned on its head. I planned to move back, and I'm back here in Charlotte now. I think a major part of it is my parents are getting older, and I want to spend more time with my parents. And, football just takes so much time away. But to answer your question specifically, and I'm glad I'm not. I'm glad I'm doing this again. I'm enjoying it still. Again, we're in a great situation. I don't think the camaraderie between 4 people at Roto World has ever been shared, and the respect has ever been shared like it is between me, Hayden, Pat, and Daigle right now. It's in a really good situation. I would love to help people striving to get into sports media, and specifically on camera and creating content, and help them find their voice. The last 3 or 4 years at NBC, we have interns that roll through in the summer, right? And obviously every single intern that comes through is either as a connection or is at Syracuse or a big time program, so on and so forth. But they all want to be on camera, all of them. And so each year we get about 10 to 15, take them into the studio in one of the first few weeks that they are at Sanford, Connecticut. And then we just put something on camera, about 1 to 2 minutes, something pre-planned. Then I'll meet with them a handful of times that summer. And then at the end, we get them back in there and see how much development has happened. And that's been the best thing about my last 2 or 3 years. I absolutely love it. If that's a teacher, if that's a consultant, I really enjoy seeing other people achieve their dreams. Let's put it that way. Because I've been super fortunate to do mine as well, Sig.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to sift through here. And I was terrible on camera. When I was on camera, I was
too, man. I was so bad.
Yeah.
I was so bad. And I think part of it goes back to what you said earlier. Reps are important.
Yeah.
It's just all about reps. Everyone sucks unless you just have a Kay Adams personality.
Right.
Then you're just going to be bad on camera. Me, I wanted to be perfect every single time. I had these lines in my head that I wanted to say them the exact same way.
Right.
And if they didn't, I was scared to death. Well, guess what? When I went back and watched everything that I did, the moments that were best was when I did go off script.
Right.
I knew the material.
You were being a human being.
Exactly. and when I screwed up, and in that moment when you pause, you feel like in your head it's a minute long or it's 30 seconds long. But then you look back on it, it's a natural pause.
Yeah.
And so why not just have a conversation with someone? And I think that's the biggest thing is, this isn't local news. It's not reading from a teleprompter where you're strict in, strict out, no personality, boom, icy. No. more than ever, and you might be able to back me up on this, more than ever, people go to all these thousands of websites and different places for content because they like the people who are delivering it and they like their personalities.
Yes.
And so don't try to be something that you're not. Just try to be who you are, and just be conversational and be honest and be natural. And I think that that's what people cling on to most now.
Yeah, it's really, and what I like about what you said about helping people, pulling people up, giving them opportunities, helping them get the opportunities that they deserve or they could earn, is all the media continues to get democratized now. And if people have a voice and have something to contribute, the barriers to entry are so low. Your content can get worldwide. You don't need NBC. You don't need a big 500-pound gorilla media monster behind you for your voice to grow and your content to grow. So I love that. And yeah, I guess you are getting, wanting to teach, you're entering another phase of your life. But what's good is, it sounds like, I want to point out the larger message for people is seeing what energizes you as you go through your day. Because that's one of the things that is nice about being part of this world, Josh, is the flow of the season, the very unique way that you experience time as someone who follows football so closely as your job. It energizes you. It gives you the energy every week to do your work.
Yeah.
And all the interactions. I was terrible on camera, by the way, because I was always thinking about what I shouldn't do instead of, like you said, just expressing yourself.
What happened to where he wins, Sig? Where he wins, you got to lean into where you win.
Well, my theory about being on TV as opposed to being on the radio, although I suppose for me, like, I feel like I had something to say, but I think the people who do best on TV are people that have a very strong self-esteem. Let's put it that way.
Self-absorbed, I would even go that far.
Yeah.
And I think the Instagram culture is self-absorption as well. That's so difficult for me. I'm not, throwing anyone under the bus with that. If you have that self-confidence and self-belief, like you're saying, and just you're handsome or beautiful and want to show it off to the world, power on you.
Yeah.
I'm not quite there yet, but I also throw in this one. If any of your listeners that are young or whatever want to go in this direction, shoot me a tweet or whatever. And I would love to check on their work and see if I can be an extra set of eyes. The other part of that is, even when I graduated college in 2011, we used physical tapes to record everything. Like, you had to have a massive camera. You had to be in a studio with all that stuff. Everything that I ever did in college can now be done just on your freaking cell phone, So it is so much easier now. There is no excuse that if you want to be a content creator to not create content at this moment. You don't need these massive productions. So what I come across with often is people just trying to want to be perfect immediately. No, the best way to find that is just do it. And then your 5th one is going to be terrible. Your 10th one is going to be awful. Your 15th one you're going to hate, but when you get to 20, 25, 30, it's going to be so much better. And the only time to really improve is to get reps and to swing it back. That's why I think, and again, we're not football players, but this idea of sitting and waiting at the quarterback position, I think, is bad, because it truly is something that you learn from your failures, your mistakes, and learning with live reps instead of just watching on the sideline.
Yeah, it's funny because giving people useful skills, like your children, maybe like 150 years ago, it's like all kinds of agricultural things. And when we're talking about the 7-year-old, like teaching him how to do his own YouTube channel, where he shows like the toys he likes to play with, because he does it naturally. We just need to show him how to set up the camera and put a title in and play. These are skills. These are life, at least earning skills now in the year 2020. And speaking of parents, really quick, because I think it's really sweet that you said you want to spend more time with your parents. Because the oldest among us, even though there's a whole politics layer here that I won't go into, are the possessors of so much wisdom, so much life experience, whether it's your parents or just other older generation folks. In New Orleans, they venerate ancestors for sure, like and otherwise, like the folks that have been there, done that. Just tell me a little bit about your parents and why you want to spend more time with them.
Well, so I'm adopted. Have I ever talked about this with you, Sig?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm adopted. I was adopted very, very young. I have a brother. He's actually my real brother, but he was adopted a year before I was. Anyways, I think that there's always this subliminal feeling, and this has never been an overt thing that we've discussed, that, they have put me in a situation to just succeed. It's like T-ball. Like, the ball's just sitting right there, and all I have to do is hit it. It's not someone throwing it at 90 miles an hour at me and I better get lucky and hit a single at best. They are putting me in a position that if I fail, it's on me. And there are certain parts of your life, I've always understood that. And I would consider myself a decent human being. But, moving away for 7 years and now they're over 70, they're 72. It gets to a point, and when it hit 70, Sig, that's when it started. It really came, it hit hard. It was real. And, they're wonderful. My mom was in advertising. She was like a vice president of a company, and she quit because they got my brother and I, and then my dad was just a lawyer forever, and had his own law firm. But he still came to my sports games and was there for every experience. And I think about it now, Sig, if I had a child at this moment and what is it? It's 1:45 now.
Right.
If at 3:15 he had a lacrosse game, how am I going to put down all this work that I had to get there?
Right.
And so those are things once you become an adult yourself and you have responsibilities yourself, and then realize everything that your parents put down for you to be there for you, that hits hard. I'm nowhere near being a parent myself, but
don't do it.
but my respect for them and admiration for them continues to grow each year as I become more mature myself.
This is beautiful. This is why I created On the Couch, so we could have a moment where we end up nothing about football. Appreciate your parents or anybody who sacrificed for you, and that's beautiful, man. Your soul, your bright, shining, golden soul, is on display, and we're here on display. Roto World, and Hayden and John and Pat. I mean, these are all among the best among us too. So Roto World's part of your daily routine anyway. You already know that. We march on. Remember, fantasy football, it rewards perseverance. So next week, someone else will be stepping on the landmine. And no matter what, we just enjoy spending time with y'all here. Thank you so very much for being part of what we do and giving us the privilege to get to serve you, as always.